There's so many people out there that don't realize what is possible. You started from pretty humble beginnings, and you were inspired not from seeing what you wanted, but by seeing what you didn't want in your family financially. Can you talk about that and how much of that has had an impact on you to create the type of lifestyle that you have for your family?
Well, looking back on it, it's hard to say we didn't have, right? When I was in it, you don't realize that, right? Growing up, the youngest of nine kids, we made do, right? We had food to eat. Dad worked like a crazy man. He was always at work. We had food. We had clothes. Most of my clothes were hand-me-downs since I have six older brothers, and I really never got my own pair of paint. I remember painter pants. My first pair of Yeah, my first pair of pants that I got from the store that wasn't a hand-me-down was a pair of painter pants jeans when I was in the seventh grade. So, I don't know that I saw that I didn't want that. However, I did see what there was available, and I wanted to go after that. And I felt like, okay, Dad's made it possible for me to do good things, right? And he always taught me go to school and get a job, right? He was poor dad in advice, yet he was rich dad in action.
What are some of those X's and Y's that if a person changed in their life right now, that they would start to, it's not going to be the magic beans. There's no magic beans, there's no silver bullet. But what are some of the things, Jason, that a person can change, maybe in the way that they look at, finances or wealth, that would literally start to change the way that their life was going?
Number one is ownership of where you're at. So there's a great book called Extreme Ownership by a Navy SEAL, right? And he talks all about that you've got to own up to where you're at, right? And once you get that and understand that where you at, particularly when you get a little bit older, maybe 14-year-old, that's not necessarily the case, but you start to come to an age of reason and saying you got to take 100% ownership of where you're at and what's happened in your life, and realize that all of what you have right now is a result of your decisions and a result of your rejection of ideas. Sometimes when you see in other people, fame, fortune, whatever, those are ideas that you've rejected. You've rejected reaching out. You've rejected going out on a limb and asking for this or that, or going and volunteering at someone's company simply so you can be mentored by that person, right? Well, other people do it. So that's number one is X, is take 100% ownership. Number two is recognizing that your upbringing and everything is simply that. That doesn't dictate where you can go from here. Once you own where you're at, you can dictate where you go from here forward, right? And that's going to be based upon your habits, your cultures, and your education.
How do you create the figure out gene when they're not having to do it? Because for you, I know that you built your wealth, you built your fortune because you had to. There was nobody else that was doing it for you. How do you continue on and keep that cycle going of the figure outable gene?
So when we talked earlier about the difference between being rich and wealthy, part of that wealthy, in my opinion, is a culture in the family, right? And part of that culture is you need to get together, you need to tell the stories, right? This is how we got where we're at. This is what we came through. Because the next generation doesn't appreciate that hard work. And that's why it's usually, from three generations from shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve. You've heard that. It's for the fact that you haven't passed on that culture to say, this is where it came from. You need to appreciate that. And they need to hear the story over and over and over again.
But you're very, very, very sensitive to this, and not just sensitive, but you're aware of this. And even to your point earlier, where you were saying, Saving Private Ryan, where you're not watching movies like that, or listening to music like that, or being around people who are using, profanity. How can you exist in today's society with the type of foul language that there is? How can you do that? And why is it so important for you and for your family?
Um, when I was a senior in high school, Dad I was walking down the hall, and I had taken the ASVAB test, and I guess I scored like off the charts. There was a full bird colonel and a major that saw me, and I don't know how they knew me. They just said, Henderson? And of course, I responded to the uniform. I said, yes, sir. Come in here. And I was like, I go in there, and they sat me down and said, look, where do you want to go to school? What do you want to do? We can guarantee you anything you want. You just need to enlist, right? I had scored so high on this test. I said, you want to go be on the nuclear subs? You want to do this? Whatever. It's yours. And of course, I thought about it, but yet I went home and talked to Dad, and Dad said, he said, I went to war so you don't have to. That was one of the purposes I went to war, so you wouldn't have to go to war. And what I learned from that is Dad stood between me and harm. Okay? And I have the feeling that I need to forever stand between, in particular, my daughters and harm. I want to do the same thing for my sons. And I don't care how much success, how much money I make, a notoriety, it's not going to compensate for me being a failure in my own home.